Hello and welcome to this webinar and demonstration about the Cloudbox products. In this particular demonstration, we're going to look at how you can achieve more in Microsoft Teams as a multi-academy trust with Cloudbox. So today we've got myself, Director and Consultant of Cloud Design Box, and we've got Lloyd Tooton, our trainer and consultant, who's going to be on hand to answer any of your questions throughout the presentation. There is a question and answer box. So if you look in your top, I think it's in your top right, there should be a speech bubble with a question mark on. Feel free to ask questions at any point. We'll try and answer them as we go along, but if we don't get a chance, we'll come back to all of the questions at the end as well. Hi Lloyd, thanks for joining us today.
Hi Tony.
Hiya. So just to introduce Lloyd briefly, Lloyd does a lot of our training and consultancy, so he works really closely with schools and trusts when they're designing these sites and planning them out, and also training them how to add the content and to use them. So the agenda for today, we're going to tell you a bit about ourselves and some good user adoption practices. So you'll definitely want to consider those before you even set up SharePoint and Teams. And then we'll go into some demos. So we'll have a look at a typical school setup, and then how you might also set up a mat level site as well. And then at the end, we've got some questions and answers. So anything we don't answer during the session, we'll come to at the end. So a bit about ourselves. We're a team of education, Teams and SharePoint experts. We support over 280 schools in the UK and abroad. And just to quickly go through some of the features and the benefits that we'll have a look at today. So some of the big benefits that we try and bring to Teams for education is saving teacher time. So making sure that you've got one version of the truth, rather than having to have extra copies of documents everywhere and create an extra teacher workload. We try and centralize all of that, so you're saving your teachers time, but also saving department leader time, because they can check the quality of those resources because you've stored them all in the central locations, and also they can keep track using the assignment analytics as well, just to make sure that their department is setting all the relevant work. And I guess a really important aspect that we'll be looking at today as well is improving communication. So having those areas where you can publish resources to wide audiences. So that might be at the school level, but it might also be at the MAT level as well. And making it an enjoyable, easy to use experience. So before we get started on sort of the demonstration of the setup, we'll just have a quick chat about the long-term strategy and user adoption aspects to the project. So whenever you start anything like this, it's a massive change for staff as well as the students, because people may have been using file shares for many years, and to change everything overnight is really difficult, and it's something we would suggest creating a long-term strategy to do. So making sure you have that long-term plan to move to the cloud. And during that time, making sure that you build staff confidence with that technology by providing training sessions. So again, that's something we can help you out with. If you can't do it internally, then we've got CPD certified courses. We're a Microsoft Global training partner, so they can get their MIE badges as well. But after having those training sessions, it's also really important to measure how well they've gone, so that you can keep improving on that user adoption over the long term. And then there's all the other benefits of moving to the cloud, so saving costs and saving IT time as well. So before we move on to the demo, I'll just talk to you quickly about the user adoption journey that you're likely to go on over the next year or so as you implement the cloud in your trust. So before you even get started, it's really important to create a vision for the school. So whether that's having a look at the school's own ethos and making a vision around that, providing staff with what it's going to look like, how it's going to work, get them excited, get them involved in that right at the beginning, and actually then giving some key people ownership over the project, whether it's some teacher learning leads, as well as your technical leads, SLT, making sure they're involved right from day one, and creating that long-term plan with your milestone dates. So like we say, it might be a year plan for you, it might be 6 months. Everybody is at a different stage at their school. It might be different at different schools within your MAT as well. So make sure that's a personalised long-term plan and have some milestone dates in place so you can measure the rollout over that time period. And make sure you support the staff with that training, measure how well that training's gone, resolve any issues that you get along the way, and making sure that you can just keep adjusting that strategy. So when you do train your staff, again, it's not going to be a one-off event, it's going to be something that's ongoing. It might be part of their CPD time. Where you train the staff, you measure how well that training's gone, maybe not immediately after, but definitely not long after they've had the training, and then adjust your strategy. It might be the case they need additional help. It might be the case the school's maybe quicker than you originally thought, and it's okay to adjust that strategy. I would definitely recommend doing that and keeping it flexible, just to make sure that you bring everybody on that journey with you and you don't leave anybody behind. So we're going to jump into a demonstration, and I'm just going to switch over into Teams and SharePoint. So what I might do is in this case, we'll start off in Teams itself, because you might have found over the pandemic that schools in your trust might have been using Teams to work from home, work remotely, and during that time period they've become a bit more confident using Teams than what they were before, and it might have even embedded in your school already. So that's a great win if that's the case, and it's something you can definitely build on. And everything we're going to look at today in terms of SharePoint is also available in Teams. So one of the apps we set up, it's called Viva Connections, is to actually embed your intranet within Teams itself. And that might be a trust intranet, so it might be your trust level site, it could be your school level site, and it could be both that you push out into Teams and make available as an app down this left-hand side. So I'm going to start off in an individual school to show you how we set those up, and then we'll take a step back and look at it from a trust level perspective. So how the trust might use this setup to bring people together so they can work together, but also have a centralized place for those trust level resources as well. So in terms of a school site, what we'll normally do is set up a school intranet for the individual school. This is our demo school called Cloud Academy, and it's got the colours and the logo across the top. We've got some sample content on this page, so we've got some news, and this might be news from around the school. You could even pull in news from the trust as well. So this doesn't have to be specific to just that individual school. It could actually pull in news from around the tenant as well. And that's going to be personalized for the end user. So it might be staff can see staff items on here, but students don't see those items. So that shared homepage is still personalized depending who you're logged in as. We've got things like word of the day, people searches on here. We've even got some trust news feeding in and some training videos. But the idea is that these areas will evolve over time as a school uses it, and they'll probably find lots of different reasons and different things that they might put on those pages. And that's really easy to edit those pages. You can just click the edit button and you can edit the content on these. You can drag and drop items around the page and add lots of different exciting and compelling components to the page. Now across the top, we've got the school logo and the school colours, and this brings out the mega menu where we can see all the sites and teams that we have access to. So again, this is personalised for the individual person who's logged in. And some of these might be your communication sites where you're publishing resources to wide audiences in the school. So it might be the case that actually you've got a library site, maybe the library team look after this page, and they might have information about the library team on here, books of the week, countdown to World Book Day, that might have their own news on here. And again, they can personalize this content and add to it whatever they want. And you might also have some centralized staff resources for that school, and it might include things like your IT guides, your policy documents. Again, some of this stuff might be at the trust level, but some of it will be specific to that individual school. And then you might have your handbook, your staff daily, weekly staff briefing, lunch rota. And some of the reasons for using SharePoint is that you can quickly and easily automate some of those business processes that you might have in school. So this is a really, really basic example. We've got a policy library, and we've just quickly added, using the out of the box options, time and date column called expiry date. We've color coded it so we can quickly see which policies have expired. And there's even things like workflows that you can turn on to get an email before that policy expires. So that's a really simple example, but over time you might decide to add in workflows. We had an event, I think it was last week, with Polymat. Really good demo if you want to go and have a look at that. And what they've done is over time they've added additional workflows to automate some of those business processes that happen in school. So anything that's paper-based, eventually you might decide to move that into SharePoint. But the first thing is get your documents in there, get people using it, and then add on those extras when you're ready. The other aspect of this is your collaboration teams. So this is where you're going to be storing resources that you're going to work on in confidential areas with teams of people that you work with. So again, this really is a replacement for some of those staff shared drives that you might have in school, where you might have a finance folder and only the finance team can access it. Then that will become a finance team inside SharePoint and Teams. And I can jump into one of those. Again, I would only see the ones that I'm in. So if I was in the data team, then I could go into the data team. I could open up one of those channels and I could work on those documents. And you'll see this is also a team as well. So if I was using Teams, I could just jump in through Teams. I could click on this link and open it in Teams. And then I could also do chat video calls with that group of people inside Teams. But it's quite nice to expose it in SharePoint because it's a nice, well-governed list. And if you've got staff who aren't quite confident with Teams yet, then that's a nice, easy way to get them in and editing documents within SharePoint. So the other aspect of this is the teacher learning sites. So you'll have your class teams. They get created every academic year for all of the classes that exist in your MIS. And that's something that we do automatically. So those will sync overnight. And these will exist for that one academic year, just like they do inside your MIS system. And then they get rolled over the next academic year. The old ones get archived off and you get a new set created. Now, one of the main problems that a lot of teachers have, and this might be the case in your trust, is that if you teach multiple classes, maybe you teach, 4 Year 11 English classes every year, then you don't want to be uploading resources 4 times every academic year because, that will create the teacher a lot of extra work. They're not really collaborating with other people in their department that way. So the whole department is creating an extra workload for itself. And it's really hard for the head of department to keep track of the quality of those resources because they're in lots of different places, lots of different versions of them. So the idea is that even though you might have lots of different English teams, class teams, we also create a centralized resource site for your subjects. And these are connected to those class teams. So as a teacher, you store all of your resources in the centralized resource area, and you can reuse them with all of your class teams every single academic year. So again, this list will be pair-sized for classes that you teach or that your students are enrolled on. And if we go into one of those subject areas, we can see that we've got a staff-only area with resources that only staff can access, and then some student-facing resource libraries. And these are areas where the students can see documents, but only the teachers can edit them. So it's a bit like a revision base. It's a resource area for them to go in and get access to any resources. And again, this is linked to that MIS data. So if I was a student in Year 11, I can revise back through previous academic years, but I can't see any age inappropriate content. And it's really important to get your curriculum leaders involved in the planning of these sites. Like we said, right at the beginning in terms of user adoption, because it might be the case that you want to create year group based libraries. It could be key stage based, it could be course based. It really depends how you teach the curriculum in school. So again, get them involved in the planning of these sites. And if I go into one of these libraries, you can see that this is similar to OneDrive, if you've seen OneDrive before, or SharePoint, or Teams files area. This is a place where you can store your resources, you can drag and drop them in, and you can upload them into here or create brand new documents within the browser. We also add in some education specific tagging, and that is just going to help you as you scale up. It's completely optional. Teachers don't have to tag everything, but it is useful. So if I was searching for Of Mice and Men inside SharePoint, then it'll bring me back all of the documents that have the words Of Mice and Men in the title, but also the content. So search is really good anyway without any tagging at all. But if you did want to search for different aspects of those documents, maybe it's an AQA resource or AQA Key Stage 4 Of Mice and Men resource, it will help drill into those resources. And as your areas grow and scale over time, and as you have more schools come on board inside your tenant, then you'll find that you potentially have hundreds of thousands or potentially millions of documents if you're a large multi-academy trust. So actually, students being able to search across all of the schools in the trust or just their own school, it really makes it far more powerful if you do tag those resources. Just makes it a lot more scalable as the trust grows. And as a teacher, it means that potentially you might decide to open up resources across all of the schools so teachers can share them, and we'll come on to that shortly when we look at the trust level sites. So those are your centralized resource areas. They're there forever, they're going to grow. And then you've also got your individual class teams for that school. One thing we do add in here to help teachers and students is, if you've been using it for more than 1 year, there's also a little time machine function, and I can go back to any of those archive classes from the previous academic year. If there's some coursework or classwork in there that I need to reference, and I can always jump back into one of those early classes. And that's just a bit easier than having to go in through the Teams interface and find your archive classes. So if we jump into one of these classes, this is a Year 11 English class that this teaches. I can see all of the students in this group, and I can jump straight into a relevant work area within inside that class team. So if I open up that class team, that's going to open up Microsoft Teams, and it'll go straight into 11Y English 3, so Year 11 English set 3 class. And again, potentially you'll have 1,200 of these per secondary school in the trust. So there might be a lot of these that get generated and automated. I won't go through the functionality in detail because we don't have the time today, but we do have some other videos going into how you'd use these class teams in the classroom. So we'll share with you some links at the end so you can go and have a look at those videos in a bit more detail. But I'm just going to show you the extras that we add into here to hopefully save teachers time. So one of those is an extra tab into every single class team, English class team that you have every single academic year. And that is a link to those centralized resources that you can reuse over and over with your classes every academic year. So as a teacher, you're not having to upload your resources into every single English class team that you teach. It's always going to be there from that centralized resource area. And even if you have, differentiation in that class, you can always copy those resources and bring them in, but your master copy, that's one version of the truth that stays in that centralized resource area for you to share as a department. One thing we do add into these file areas, which is a place where you might have previously put your class materials, is a student work folder. And this is just a drop-off folder that you can, the student can see their own folder, teacher can see everybody's, and this is just a place where they can store some work that both the teacher and the student can see in an area that's non-assessed. It's just an area that both of them can see those resources. So that's really a quicker and easier way of storing it in your student OneDrive and then sharing it with your teacher, because we know that gets really complicated if you're trying to get all of your class to do that. And from class dashboard, you can also click on the student and jump straight into that student work area within Teams, and that will just quickly open up Teams, open up the Files tab in the right team, and go straight into Susan Abbott's folder. Again, just to try and make it as simple as possible, as easy as possible to use. Now, one other thing that used to crop up, and again, it might have done in your trust, your school, is that heads of department were previously asking to be added into every class team in their department. Now, that's a really bad idea because they're going to get lots of notifications. They're going to be in hundreds of teams. It's going to be really difficult for them to keep track of their own students and classes. So the idea is that the head of department can keep track of the quality of the resources by just looking at that central resource area, because that's the ones that everybody's using. But there's also an admin panel that we provide. And inside here, you can have a look at the whole school assignment analytics. So the usage over time, I can drill down into an individual subject area. And I can also drill down into an individual class within that subject area as well. So when that's loaded, just go down into English and then go straight into an English class, and we can see individual assignments have been set for those students. So hopefully save you a bit of time, not having to jump in and micromanage each individual class team. While we're in here, this is an area where you can delegate it to maybe a teaching and learning lead in each school in the trust, and without giving them global admin access to edit everything in the tenant, you can delegate access just to the CDB portal just for one particular school in that tenant. And this is an area where they can see assignment analytics if they're a school leader. If they're an IT admin, then they can come in here and they can create new teams, new communication sites within that school. They can fill in the form, it'll create that site, it will add it to the mega menu, it'll security trim it, and it'll make it live with all the web parts on it without you having to do it manually. There's also the option in here for maybe one of your data managers to come in and apply cover to classes. So you can grab a teacher, you can add them into an individual class, and you can, maybe if a teacher's off self-isolating for 10 days, you can drop them in temporarily into that class team without having to do it inside your MIS. So you're not having to change it in Arbor or Sims, you can just do it inside here temporarily. And you can always switch between the different schools in your trust using this menu option if you have access to them. So that's a really quick overview of the class teams that people might use individually in those classes to provide teacher learning solutions to the students. There's also the subject classes, the subject teams, and this is an area for only staff can access. Only the English staff are added automatically. And this is an area where they can have their video calls, their chats, they can share best practices, but they can also upload resources into here that is instantly available for the students to access in the student area. And again, this is the same area we saw in SharePoint, the same area we saw in the class team. That's that centralized resource area. And what you might want to do as a trust is create some centralized staff departmental areas. So you've got your subjects, but you might also want department teams where you might bring, all the chemistry, biology, physics teachers into one team where again they can share best practices, they can have their video calls, they can talk together as a department. But you can actually do this across the entire trust as well. So depending how your trust works together, how you want to sort of improve collaboration between the schools, you could actually create for example, a science staff team with all the science teachers across all of the schools in that single team. And this can be in addition to the teams they have in the individual school, and it could be a place where you can again try and raise standards, share best practices across the different schools and get all the teachers together in one place. It's really easy to communicate, to message each other, and to share those resources. And there's also the all staff and the all teacher teams that we create per school. And again, those can be siloed, so you can talk about items that are particular to that individual school. So that's a quick overview of an individual school site. And you can have as many school sites as you want inside a tenant. And the way we do that is all of the sites have a prefix, all of the class teams have a prefix as well, so they never clash. And this is a quick example of a primary school site on the same tenant. Again, we've got slightly different content on the home page, which again, you could delegate access to this, so certain people in that school can actually edit it and update it. And then you've got all of their collaboration, communication sites, their class teams, their centralized resource areas as well. So that's completely separate. And again, you can have as many of those in a single tenant as you want. And then as a trust, you might decide to have a top level site. We're actually going to share resources across the entire, across all of the schools in your trust. So, you know, anything like policy documents, catering information, IT documents, anything like that is better at the trust level, because it means you've only got one place to store, update and notify people, rather than having to do it at an individual school level or through email, etc. So this is a quick example of a trust level site. Again, you can add your own content to these pages. We've got some trust level news that's controlled by the trust. And again, that will be limited to who can actually publish that. We might have some, you know, welcome messages from the trust CEO, some wellbeing resources. Again, it's entirely up to you what content goes on these pages. But you can see this is an ideal place to put your policies and procedures, especially if you've centralized those as a trust. When we go to the mega menu at the top, again, you'll see the trust logo, the trust colors at the top of this site. And the menu includes different items. So things like, and again, we've grouped these together in this particular way, but you could do it differently. We've got our centralized services. So things like it might be catering, it could be policy documents, marketing, etc. Those are all available to everybody in the trust. And again, we could delegate access so certain people could edit those sites. But we might also have some central teams where we've got teams of people working across the entire trust. And that's a place that they're going to work together in those confidential areas that nobody else can see. So you might have a leadership team with somebody in each school in the trust, and they need a place to come together and to collaborate and work together. And again, that's ideally going to be a team, because not only can they share documents, but they can also chat and do their video calls and their meetings and all the other content that you can do inside Microsoft Teams as well. And depending how you work as a trust, you might decide in the future to open up some of your school sites so that people from different schools within the trust can visit those sites and get access to resources, but not necessarily the sensitive data that might be in maybe some of your staff sites. So again, it's something we're thinking about. Do you want to actually open up those resource areas at individual school level? And again, just bring the schools closer together so they can work together, share resources together as a trust. So going back to our slides. So just to quickly summarize what we've talked about today. So the centralized resource areas might be per school, and those are places where teachers can save time by having one version of the truth that they can share with all of the classes that they teach, but also all of the other teachers in that department. And those will appear inside every single class team that you have every single academic year. And the different types of teams that you might have within a school. So you might have class teams where you've got teacher learning resources and you're setting assignments for students and they're participating in the lessons. You might have your subject teams where you've got your centralized resources, but only staff can chat and talk inside those staff only teams. And you've got your departmental teams, which might bring staff together across different schools, or it might just be across different subject areas within the same school. And there's a really quick summary just to explain the difference between those different types of teams that you might have at a school level, and obviously that top level, that yellow area there, those might also be a trust team where you've got people from all of the science departments across all of the schools in a single place where they can collaborate together. So that's a quick summary of the demonstration of what our product does and how we can bring that together as a trust, so at an individual school level, but also how they all come together at the trust level as well. We've got some events coming up in the next few weeks. So again, we're looking at it from a further education perspective in Teams. That's next week. And then also we're looking at those centralized resource areas in a bit more detail with Lloyd in a couple of weeks' time. So I've put our contact details on the screen. If you've got a camera phone, then you can point your camera at those QR codes at the bottom. That will take you to our Twitter page. It will also take you to our newsletter page where you can sign up for free tips and guides and information that we send out monthly. It's also our YouTube channel. We've got lots of free guides and video guides that we produce, and our Facebook page, which is a closed community where online educators can share the best practices, their ideas in a secure place. There's also our contact details on the screen, so you can get in contact via the website, our email address or phone number. And like I said, there's lots of other resources that we have available on the website. If you go to our blog page, there's lots of other guides, how to make SharePoint sites look great, along with hundreds of other guides that we produce each month. So just going to the questions, Lloyd, have we got any questions that have come through that you'd like to ask?
A couple of questions, just read out. So there's one question just about the Viva connections. So how can that actually be set up for a school? And is that just for maybe the trust area, or would it be for a school site as well?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So in terms of Viva Connections, so just to confirm to everybody what that is. So Viva Connections is bringing your SharePoint sites within Teams, so that again, if people are using Teams really well in the school or trust anyway, then instead of getting them to learn to go to a web browser and open up SharePoint and go to a URL, then you can actually bring that experience into Teams as an app. So in terms of what you asked, Lloyd, you could have a link here just for the individual school that person's in, and you can target it at the people within that school. But then you might also want to surface things like your trust sites as an app. So make people aware of what's happening in your trust, what the news is, and again, you can make that available as another link here. This one's called intranet. You might want to call one the school name and one the trust name, and again make that available as two different buttons within there. Maybe the trust one applies to everybody in the trust or just the staff in the trust, and the school one might just apply to people that are in that particular school. So yeah, you can do both of those, and if you want to find out more about how you can set that up, we have got a free guide on that. If you're our customer, if you're a Cloud Design Box customer, then just log a support ticket with us and we'll set it up for you. But if you want to have a go doing it yourself, there's some instructions on our website. If you just search for Cloud Design Box Viva Connections, we've got a talk through guide on how to do that on our website, a little video guide. I think there's some PowerShell involved. It is a bit technical, but once it's set up, it's there and it's available for everybody. Any other questions, Lloyd?
There was one other question. So this was just more about channels in Teams. So if people already had some Teams set up and they're using those channels, if you was using that in a SharePoint site as well, is there a way that you can access those files in the channels from the SharePoint site?
Okay, so you're saying that if we're in one of these, if we're in a team, I'm guessing something like we'll use the one we looked at earlier, the data team. So you've got all these different channels here. Is that what we're talking about?
Yep. So in the demo that you showed on the SharePoint side, how would you access some of those channels from the SharePoint site?
Okay, yeah. So some of these teams will appear in two places. So they'll appear here inside Teams itself, and that's a great place. If people are ready for Teams, that's a great place for them to go, because they can do their chats in here, they can do their video calls, there's all the other tabs and exciting things that you can do inside Teams. But if people are accessing it through SharePoint, they can access exactly the same team. So that will be available if you're in that team. So that's the data team there. And what we do is we set up a web part so that all the channels appear automatically here. So that's exam analysis channel. If we have a look inside Teams, here we've got an exam analysis channel here. And inside each channel in Teams, you get your own sort of files area where you can share documents. So these are all the documents here. And if I go into the same area inside SharePoint, you'll see that you get exactly the same documents here. Now there's obviously a difference between working in SharePoint and Teams. There's sort of pros and cons to both of them really. And you can switch. So I can click on the button here to switch into the team, and I can click on the button here to switch into SharePoint. So you can see really it's the same place that we're looking. It's just through two different sort of interfaces. So we can work on the same documents in both locations, and that will work absolutely fine. SharePoint has some of those more advanced features. So the search inside SharePoint is really good. Like we looked at earlier, it will search inside those documents as well as the titles of them. There's also a few more options here in terms of sharing. There's a recycle bin if you delete a document. There's a version history. So if somebody makes a mistake to a document, we can go back to an earlier version. And you'll see in Teams, it's a bit more of a cut down version. So it's more based around chat and video calls rather than sort of all the document management features. Of course, you can click on a document inside Teams and it will open it up and you can edit it. And if you're editing that document at the same time as somebody else, so if I've got that open up inside Teams and somebody else has that same document open inside SharePoint, you'll see that you can edit the same document at the same time as that other person. You can see there that they're now editing that document inside Teams. I can come in here and write another word, and you'll see if I switch back over into Teams, you'll see I can see that person here has typed that live inside that document. So if you have some people working in Teams, some people working in SharePoint, you can go in either way to edit and work on those documents. It doesn't really matter. It's sort of preference, but it's quite nice to have both ways to get in there to support you from a user adoption perspective. Some people will be quite confident using SharePoint and Teams, and other people it'll all be new to them, and for them they might be a bit more confident using sort of the traditional sort of website based navigation. Okay, so I hope that answers that question. Have we got any other questions, Lloyd?
I think that's all the ones that have come through.
Okay, great. So I think we had a question from Andy about some of the costs, so we'll get back to you with all the different options for that. Joanne will get in contact with you to provide all the information and take your details for that. So if you can drop us your details in a private message, we'll get back to you on that. But thanks everyone. Thanks for your time today. Thank you, Lloyd, for asking those questions at the end. And like I say, we've got lots of other videos on our site, how-to guides. Even if you don't use our products, there's hopefully lots of useful resources for you on there as well. Thanks, everyone.